right, my partner in crime, the gentleman from Virginia, has arrived. So we're going to get started. Yes, thank you, Mr. Connolly. So the Subcommittee on Cybersecurity, Information Technology, and Government Innovation and the Subcommittee on Oversight will come to order. I would like to begin by welcoming Mr. Connolly. Good afternoon, sir, as we tiptoe in, but also by welcoming House Administration Oversight Subcommittee Chairman Barry Loudermilk and Ranking Member Norma Torres. We also have with us Chairman Brian Stile and Ranking Member Joe Morelli. We're pleased for you all to join us today. After conferring with Chairman Loudermilk, we agreed that today's joint hearing will operate under the rules of the Committee on Oversight and Accountability. Without objection, Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton of Washington, D.C. is waived on to the subcommittee this afternoon for the purpose of questioning witnesses. Without objection, the chair may declare a recess at any time. I now recognize myself for the purpose of making an opening statement. First of all, good afternoon and welcome. This is a joint hearing of this panel, the Subcommittee on Cybersecurity, Information Technology, Government Innovation, and the House Oversight and Accountability Committee, and the House Administration Committee's Subcommittee on Oversight, which is chaired by the gentleman from Georgia to my left, Mr. Loudermilk. Since this is a joint hearing, we will all have opening statements from the chair and ranking member of both subcommittees. That's a total of 4 opening statements, so I'm going to keep my remarks as brief as possible. First, I want to explain why we're conducting this hearing jointly. The data breach we're going to get to the bottom of today is of great concern to members of Congress, staff, federal employees, and all those who use the DC Health Exchange. The overwhelming majority, about 90% of the exchange enrollees, are not affiliated with Congress. So this is not just about us. This is about everybody who's been affected by this breach. They are people who get health insurance through the exchange as individuals or employees of one of over 5,000 participating small businesses. This data breach is the latest in a troubling string of cyber breaches exposing confidential data of ordinary Americans. All too often, these breaches involve government agencies or programs to whom people are entrusting their most personal information. We know the recent data breach at DC Health Benefit Exchange Authority resulted in the theft, sale, and public posting of confidential personal information of thousands of individuals getting health insurance via the exchange. And that may not be the fullest extent of the breach. Indeed, the vulnerability through which the breach occurred may have actually exposed up to 200,000 or more individuals to hackers and exposed their personal information. Last month, several internal health insurance enrollment reports maintained by DC HealthLink were accessed without authorization and then posted online. These Excel spreadsheets sold and posted on the dark web contain data including the personal information on each exchange enrollee listed. That would be their name, their date of birth, their age, their social security number, telephone numbers, their home addresses, mailing addresses, email addresses, their employer, their health plan, their health insurance premium, race, ethnicity, citizenship status, and more. The advent of AI is only going to make breaches like this even more vulnerable to personal data. And it will only get worse if businesses and government agencies are ill-prepared for what lies ahead. People should be able to sign up for health care without surrendering to public view their most confidential personal information. So the subcommittees are convening here today to find out, with the help of our witnesses, how this data breach happened. And I do expect to have some concrete, substantive answers, because if we filibuster here today, none of us are going to be happy. This is too important to not get the information. We want to know who is responsible. We're going to want an answer for that. And we're going to want to know how those responsible are going to be held accountable. Do they even still have a job today? That's going to be one of my first questions. And what is being done to ensure that this does not ever happen again? And with that, I would like to yield to the ranking member of this subcommittee, Mr. Connolly from Virginia.
Thank you so much, Madam Chairwoman, and thank you for convening this hearing, and very much enjoy collaborating with our colleagues today. In 2022, Federal Bureau of Investigation's Internet Crime Complaint Center received 800,944 phishing, personal data breach, or other complaints representing estimated losses of more than $10.2 billion, an increase of more than $3.3 billion from just the previous year. As we stated during our last subcommittee hearing, data breaches, including government data breaches, are no longer unusual incidents. In 2015, An OPM data breach, for example, exposed the private information of nearly 22 million American individuals, including my own personal information. In 2019, the Russian Foreign Intelligence Service compromised SolarWinds software, which is widely used across the federal government. And in 2021, Microsoft reported that China's Ministry of State Security exploited vulnerabilities in their Exchange servers. Today, we're here to talk about the recent DC HealthLink data breach, which affected 56,415 individuals, including 17 members of Congress, 43 of their family members, and 585 House staff members, and 231 of their family members. Despite DC HealthLink's robust cybersecurity practices, including the use of leading commercial cybersecurity solutions, next-generation firewall protections, and increased stress testing efforts, the organization remained vulnerable to attack. According to the investigative findings to date, an undetected human error caused this breach. It was not underlying IT technical issues, legacy IT systems, or even understaffing. A human error left the database vulnerable to unauthorized access. A breach demonstrates that even organizations with sophisticated cybersecurity practices must remain vigilant to potential risks, because one small oversight is the only window an opportunistic hacker needs to break in. The breach also demonstrates that bad actors may not only hide in the dark web, they may also, as in recent high-profile cases, use stolen data that landed easily on accessible public websites where the bad actor published the information to gain notoriety. Our cybersecurity posture must adapt to this new ecosystem. Fortunately, law enforcement has been working aggressively to dismantle key players in the cyber crime ecosystem, including those associated with this very breach we're considering today. On March 15th, the FBI took down the website Breach Forums, the online hub of illicit activity used to expose the DC HealthLink data, and arrested its alleged founder. While I acknowledge the DC Health Benefit Exchange Authority's commitment to protecting the data of customers from another breach, the fact of the matter is that the information of more than 56,000 people has been compromised, putting their physical safety and financial security at some risk. These individuals join hundreds of millions of Americans who have had their data stolen in the past year alone, and data breaches are only going to grow in scope. We need to move swiftly to implement the national cyber strategy examined in this subcommittee just last month, which will drive important changes to better protect Americans' sensitive data. Throughout my career in the private sector and local and federal governments, I have championed a trifecta cybersecurity strategy that encompasses modernizing IT systems, building a skilled federal cybersecurity workforce, and most importantly, perhaps, fostering a security-centric culture at all levels of government. One of the primary ways Congress can enforce the trifecta is through consistent and sustained oversight of agency compliance with the Federal Information Technology Acquisition Reform Act, which grew out of this committee, FITARA. Through the scorecard we have and the hearings we have on that scorecard, and I very much appreciate Chairwoman Mace recommitting this subcommittee, holding those updated hearings, we have promoted effective IT modernization by empowering agency CIOs and ensuring they have a seat and a voice in decision-making. We're proud of the scorecard that has secured big victories for the IT community by elevating CIOs within their agencies to ensure they are key players in fundamental conversations. In today's hearing, we need to hear a strategy from DC Health Benefit Exchange Authority to improve oversight and internal governance proceedings. They must continue to act urgently to address remaining cybersecurity concerns, provide resources to breach victims, and instill the safeguards needed to prevent future breaches. I agree with Chairwoman Mace. We want to hear answers today, not excuses, so that we can try to make sure that this sort of thing does not happen again and that we protect the privacy of those who've had their data breached. With that, I yield back. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman.
Thank you. I now recognize Chairman Barry Loudermilk for the purpose of making an opening statement.
Well, thank you, Chair Mace, for partnering with our subcommittee to hold this joint hearing and for hosting us in your committee room here today. On March 6th, data was breached from the DC Health Exchange and posted on the dark web. As a result, the personal identifiable information of tens of thousands of people was exposed. This includes over 800 members of Congress, their staff, and families who are required by law to use DC HealthLink. The fact that such a breach was able to occur left our congressional community in shock. It's well known that the United States Congress is a key target for cyber attacks, both foreign and domestic. That's why the Chief Administrative Officer has an Office of Cybersecurity that sets high standards for vendors and contractors hoping to do business with the House. These safeguards help protect members, staff, and their families' data from thousands of cyber attacks that happen every month. Unfortunately, the DC HealthLink is not subject to those same standards. Now, prior to serving in Congress, I spent 30 years in the information systems industry, both in the public and private sector, so I know just how vital it is to ensure that there are high standards and protocols in place when dealing with personal identifiable information. Our goal for today's hearing is twofold. First, we must learn how this breach was able to happen and how we can minimize the harm to all individuals impacted. Second, we must discuss the improvements that those who support the House need to make to ensure that those impacted by this breach are never put in this position again. I also like to discuss the preliminary findings from the forensic report produced by Mandiant, a well-known cybersecurity firm that was hired by the DC Health Exchange in the aftermath of the breach. That 7-page report was shared with us on Friday, and while we're hoping it would provide more clarity, we were left scratching our heads. We still do not know who is behind the attack. We still do not know if the data is for sale on other areas of the dark web. We still do not know how much data the hacker accessed, and we still do not know exactly how this was able to occur. However, the report largely blames Amazon Web Services when, interestingly enough, Mandiant is a subsidiary of Google, one of AWS's largest competitors. While we invited representatives from Mandiant to come and testify today and answer some of our questions, they declined. That is disappointing. This breach occurred at a time when threats to members of Congress are still at historic highs. I know this firsthand. It's unacceptable that over a month later we still don't have answers and continue to be left in the dark. I look forward to getting answers and learning what steps we can take to better protect this information. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you. I would now like to recognize Ranking Member Norma Torres for the purpose of making her opening statement.
Thank you to the chair, and I want to join my colleagues in welcoming Ms. Spendor and Ms. Kaufman. Thanks for coming before our committee today. The recent data breach to the DC Health Benefit Exchange compromised the personally identifiable information, including the names, birth dates, and Social Security numbers of more than 56,000 individuals, jeopardizing their privacy and financial security. And as members and congressional staff seeking employer-sponsored health insurance were required to enroll in the marketplaces created by the Affordable Care Act back in 2014, the affected universe of the data breach also included a significant number of individuals here on Capitol Hill. I understand those affected individuals include 17 members of Congress, 435 House staff, and more than 270 spouses and dependents. A significant breach like this, further demonstrates the importance of ensuring that all organizations have the necessary cybersecurity tools to combat cybercrime. Most recently, in my own home region of the Inland Empire, I learned about how hackers attacked a local 911 center. This is a reminder that all systems are fragile and at risk of hacking threats. Today's hearing provides us with an opportunity to examine how the DC Health Benefit Exchange and other similar organizations can better protect against potential cybersecurity risks and work to ensure that this will never happen again. Ms. Kaufman, I was pleased to hear in your testimony that DC Health Link is undergoing a comprehensive security review and assessment of your entire system. And I look forward to hearing more about what you've learned so far. And I urge you to continue to work through any remaining cybersecurity vulnerabilities, including those susceptible to both malicious activity and simple human error. Ms. Spendor, in the days after the breach, you clarified to members in the Committee on the House Administration the breach did not include any House systems and stated that the portal used by the House to communicate with the DC Exchange was well protected. And as you mentioned in your testimony, the House is often a target of cyber attacks, and I look forward to hearing more about how our administrative professionals at CAO continue to work to protect the House from cyber threats, ensuring that we have the necessary protections in place to avoid further breaches. Finally, I would like to thank the CAO, the Capitol Police, the House Sergeant at Arms, and the FBI for their work on this matter in the days and weeks after the data breach. And with that, I yield back to the chair.
Thank you. I'm pleased to introduce our witnesses for today's hearing. Our first witness is Ms. Mila Kaufman, the Executive Director of the DC Health Benefit Exchange Authority, or HBX. The DC Exchange, HBX, is a public-private partnership established to develop and operate the online health insurance marketplace called DC HealthLink for residents and small businesses in the district. Our second witness is Ms. Catherine Spendor, the Chief Administrative Officer of the U.S. House of Representatives. Ms. Spendor is responsible for member and staff services, including information technology and additional business functions. We welcome everyone and pleased to have you this afternoon. Pursuant to Committee Rule 9G, the witnesses will please stand and raise your right hands. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony that you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Let the record show that the witnesses all answered in the affirmative. We appreciate both of you being here today and look forward to your testimony. I would like to remind the witnesses that we've read your written testimony and it will be entered and will appear in full in the record. Please limit your oral arguments this afternoon to 5 minutes to give us time before votes today to ask our questions. As a reminder, please press the button on the microphone in front of you when you're speaking so that it's on and members can hear you. When you begin to speak, the light in front of you will turn green. After 4 minutes, the light will turn yellow. When the red light comes up, your 5 minutes has expired. And we would ask that you please wrap up your statements. I recognize Ms. Kaufman to please begin her opening statement.
Thank you. Good afternoon, and thank you for inviting me today. My name is Mila Kaufman. I'm the Executive Director of the DC Health Benefit Exchange Authority, and I want to say how sorry I am. I know this is personal for many of you, many of your colleagues, and many staff members. We failed to prevent the theft of 2 reports, which had sensitive personal information of our customers. I want you to know that we have not and will not fail in our response, and we're working hard to make sure this never happens again. I'm here to discuss the DC HealthLink data breach affecting 56,415 current and past customers, including members of Congress, their families, and staff. On March 6, 2023, we learned that a threat actor stole personal data from DC HealthLink. While we do not have medical or healthcare information, we do have personal, sensitive information. The 2 stolen reports had personal information like name, date of birth, and Social Security numbers. On day 1, March 6, we immediately asked the FBI Cybersecurity Task Force for help and had 2 special agents in our offices that afternoon. We also engaged a leading cybersecurity firm, Mandiant. On day 2, law enforcement obtained and shared the 2 stolen reports with us. By day 3 of the breach, Mandiant identified the source of the breach, and my staff shut it down immediately. By day 4, We secured 3 years of identity theft and credit monitoring protection for all 3 major credit bureaus for our affected customers and notified them on March 9th as soon as Experian provided us with a toll-free number and generated codes for our customers to use to sign up. Although there was no evidence that additional data was stolen outside of the 2 stolen reports, out of abundance of caution, we offered the same 3 years of identity theft and credit monitoring protection services to other customers. We provided public updates on March 8th, 10th, and 14th, and also set up a dedicated webpage on dchealthlink.com. We briefed 3 U.S. House committees. We also briefed the DC business community and others we work with. On Friday, April 14th, Mandiant completed its report. The cause of this breach is a server that was misconfigured, which allowed access to the 2 stolen reports without proper authentication. The investigation shows the misconfiguration was not intentional. To be clear, it was a human mistake. At no point was the DC HealthLink enrollment system breached. We have a strong cybersecurity program, which includes technologies used by U.S. intelligence agencies and Fortune 100 companies, and have successfully repelled attacks on our network. In response to the breach, I immediately asked third-party cybersecurity experts to conduct a comprehensive review and assessment of our entire environment, including a sweep to ensure there was no other malicious activity within it, and a review of our cloud environment, our code, our configurations, and our processes and procedures. We're now focused on a comprehensive review and making improvements. We're also actively investigating how the misconfiguration occurred. I can update you when we know more. I want to reiterate how deeply sorry we are that 2 reports were stolen with personal information. We're making every effort to ensure this does not happen again. Thank you for inviting me to speak today, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you. I now recognize Ms. Spendor to begin her opening statement.
Thank you, Chairwoman Mace, Chairman Loudermilk, and Ranking Members Torres and Connolly, and other members of the House Oversight and Accountability Subcommittee on Cybersecurity, Information Technology, and Government Innovation, and the Committee on House Administration Subcommittee on Oversight. The House's information sharing relationship with DC HealthLink dates to 2013, when members and staff first enrolled in the DC HealthLink healthcare programs for calendar year 2014. The CAO's relationship with the DC HealthLink is compulsory in nature and is limited to the secure exchange of information required to facilitate House participation in its health care programs as required by the Patient Protection and Affordability Care Act, effective January 1st, 2014, and the subsequent Office of Personnel Management rulings pertaining to the law's implementation. Each month, DC HealthLink and the CAO follow an established secure data transfer protocol to pay health care premiums, report terminations, and fix information discrepancies. All the federal and state entities that the CAO shares member and staff data with, including the DC Health Benefit Exchange Authority, are required to comply with federal and state security requirements as well as their own. Once data is received by another entity, the CAO's jurisdiction ends. The CAO lacks the authority and capacity to validate or mandate the security measures employed by other government entities it is required to interface with. Upon learning about the DC HealthLink breach late morning, Tuesday, March 7th, 2023, the CAO's cyber team confirmed none of the servers nor applications supported by the House has been compromised. The CAO worked with the House leadership between March 7th and March 10th to send a series of communications, first to potential universe of impacted individuals, then to the confirmed universe of impacted individuals, providing information on freezing their and their family's credit at the 3 major credit bureaus out of abundance of caution. They also receive steps individuals should take to avoid becoming a victim of financial fraud. Notices were sent to impacted individuals no longer employed by the House, but whose information was confirmed to have been included in the breach. Additionally, the CAO participated in separate briefings for members and staff and included important breach updates and payroll and benefits newsletters distributed housewide. The CAO payroll and benefits team continues to field calls from the House community pertaining to the breach. Everyone in the House community, past and present, ever considered eligible for health care via DC HealthLink is eligible for 3 years of free credit and identity monitoring services paid for by DC HealthLink. This incident, like the 2015 OPM breach, is a sobering reminder of why cybersecurity is our top priority. Each year, the CAO deploys over 250,000 software patches, protects more than 3,000 servers, and stops tens of millions of attempted cyber attacks and billions of attempted probes. We have continuously improved our cybersecurity posture. With the support of House leadership, we address staffing deficiencies and significantly increased behind-the-scenes improvements and capabilities to include enhanced real-time network monitoring, better malware detection tools, and improved security controls over devices and applications. A strong cybersecurity posture requires consistent, strict adherence to security practices and training by every member of the House community. The House is a target. We must remain vigilant and have the right policies and capabilities to ensure we protect House data and are prepared to quickly address security issues should they arise. The CAO appreciates the opportunity to testify today, and we look forward to working with you and the other legislative branch partners as the DC HealthLink investigation continues.
Thank you both. I would now like to recognize myself for 5 minutes for questioning. You said, Ms. Kaufman, earlier that the breach was due to a misconfigured server without proper authentication. So was this sort of like an exposed IP address? Is this a password issue with authentication on the server? What actually happened?
What we know based on Mandiant's findings and investigation is that we had a misconfigured server.
What does that mean?
If you had an IP address, you can access the server without proper authentication.
So it was an exposed IP address that anybody...
If you had the IP address, you can access the information on the server.
And how long was the server misconfigured? How long was the IP address exposed?
So we are still investigating. The initial configuration of this server, we know occurred mid-2018.
So the server IP address was exposed starting in 2018?
The initial configuration of the server was mid-2018. Right now, we have
Was that the same IP address for that server when this was exposed as in 18? Was it the same IP address? Had it changed at all in that time frame? From the time it was configured to the time that the breach had, did it have the same IP address that entire time?
I don't know if it had the same IP address. I'll have to get back to you. But right now we have external experts I've asked to investigate the actual misconfiguration. What happened, when it happened, why it happened, who was involved, how it happened. We have external investigators taking a look. Once I have more information...
Is the person who, the individual or the team of individuals that set up the servers in 2018, and well, we don't know when it was misconfigured, but let's just... Are those individuals still employed or still a vendor of DC HealthLink? The individuals or the team of people that set up the server?
So that's why we're doing an external investigation, to identify who was involved in setting up all of the configurations, all of the settings, when that server was being integrated with Slack. And our suspicion is that it happened over time. And so our external investigators are looking into, starting 2018, what happened, and they're going to be looking at every year that server was configured.
So it's possible
to
the
identify.
exposure had happened over an extensive period of time since 2018, potentially.
A part of that time, that server was down. So we're in a fact-finding mission right now.
How long
and
was the server down during that time frame?
I don't know. Meaning offline. So our
How do you not know when the server was down? That seems like if you knew it was down, you would know the time frame it was down.
That's why we have external investigators taking a look to see when it was actually online, when it was offline, so we can document everything and identify who was involved, how it was configured.
Was it an employee or was it a contractor?
We have employees and we have contractors, and so that's part of our ongoing investigation being conducted by external experts. And I'm happy to provide you with all of that information when we have it.
So given that we don't know the time frame and the server was set up in 2018, is it possible that more than 56,000 people were exposed, like hundreds of thousands of people's data was exposed?
So what we know...
Is that a possibility?
What we know is 56,415 people, their information was stolen. We know that for a fact. We know that another set of consumers, current and past customers, their information was stored in the same manner that the stolen reports were stored. We have no evidence that their information was stolen.
So on this server, were there only 2 reports, or the 2 reports that were exposed were the only ones you're aware of? Was there more than 2 reports on the server?
The server had the server had multiple reports, and the server had other automation jobs. Some of the reports we know didn't have any personal information. Other reports had personal information,
Up to
and
how
that's
many
why
people could potentially have been exposed from this breach?
we're investigating that. But that's why we notified pretty much
But certainly,
everyone.
you know by the number of reports on that server, the reports that have personal data and don't, certainly you know the number of records or number of people that were exposed through the breach.
The issue is some reports existed for a week and then were replaced by other reports, so they were eliminated. We are trying to identify every potential person whose data may have been on the server, and that's why we notified a lot of people.
Yeah, no, I get that. I'm not going to complain about the way that people were notified. I think that was done well. I would tell you it was done quickly, it was done well, and from a crisis standpoint, the response was excellent. I'm more concerned about the access, the IP address, the exposed IP address, and the data that was on that server. Just as a company policy within the DC Health Exchange, are employees required to use a, quote, strong password when they're creating, authentication within the programs that you all use?
Yes, we encourage the use of strong passwords.
Is it required or is it just encouraged?
We follow DC government standards and for our passwords.
Do you all require, as a company, a matter of company policy, two-factor authentication for company passwords that are used by employees or contractors?
I will have to get back to you on what contractors are required to do.
What about employees? Are they required to use two-factor authentication for their passwords for anything that they're accessing within the organization?
Yes, it might be helpful to give you...
Are they required to use two-factor authentication? Yes or no?
Multi-factor authentication
Okay.
is required to access your systems, like your cell phone, your email.
How long has that been going on?
The multi-factor authentication requirement? I'll double check, I think, for a number of years now.
Okay.
And before you had to have codes to get in. But I'll
So
double
because we
check
don't know
that.
who's responsible for it yet, no one's been held accountable. No one's been fired or lost a contract as a result of the breach. Would that be accurate to say?
We are doing a full investigation.
Are you going to fire the contractor or the employee that created this breach issue? Will they be fired?
We're doing a full
That would
investigation.
be a no or an I don't know, which is not an acceptable answer. I have one question for Ms. Spendor. Unlike the House vendors, your office has no choice with regard to working with DC Health Exchange. Given what you know now about this breach and potential, I mean, this was an IP address totally exposed out there for God knows how long. What you know about this breach, does the DC Health Exchange meet the cybersecurity requirements of the House and its vendors? In other words, would the exchange pass muster as a House vendor? Because we know that the CAO holds our vendors to a very, very high standard in terms of the applications we're allowed to use. Is that?
At the time we had our agreement with them, put into place the various agreements that we do have with them, it's hard to know if they would pass the evaluation since we really didn't have an opportunity to do so. Certainly, if we were doing an evaluation now,
Would they pass muster today?
we would certainly have some questions, yes. We would have to reevaluate and probably ask some very hard questions on what had happened.
Okay, thank you, and I am going to yield to Mr. Connolly's 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Ms. Kaufman, how did you learn that customer data have been exposed on the publicly available website breach forums?
We work very closely with the city's technology agency, and one of their vendors identified the problem. The technology agency came to us on Monday around 12, and within 15 minutes, we confirmed that 11 of our customers' information was posted in this solicitation.
So they brought it to you?
The city technology agency we work with, correct. And then we immediately notified law enforcement, the FBI Cybersecurity Task Force, and asked them for assistance.
As I understand it, the DC Capitol Police identified another website, pastehub.net, where the hacker posted a sample of the purloined data. To your knowledge, did the stolen data appear on other publicly available websites in addition to those two, breach forums and pastehub?
Not to my knowledge, but that's also a question I'm happy to follow up with law enforcement as well as the external experts we have.
During the early days of the data breach investigation, I guess by Mendiant, what steps did your office take to inform the appropriate entities of the breach to ensure that other potential targets received alerts as quickly as possible?
We and the city technology agency immediately notified the U.S. Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency, U.S. Homeland Security and Emergency Management Agency. We notified CMS, our oversight agency, within the hour of learning of the breach. And we also, the next day, once we had confirmation that congressional information was in the stolen reports, we notified the House and Senate personnel offices, as well as OPM and others. We took immediate steps for mitigation, and we did two things. Mandiant, within 2 days, was able to identify the source of the breach, and we shut it down immediately. That was within 2 days of the breach. And within 3 days of the breach, we were able to secure identity theft and credit monitoring protection for 3 years for all 3 major credit bureaus. And that Thursday, March 9th, we notified 56,415 people whose information was stolen. And then that Friday, March 10th, we started to notify other people whose information was stored in the same manner that these stolen reports were stored in,
Were the people,
out of abundance of caution.
Were the people in that 56,000 population, they were told directly, your data has been breached?
Yes.
Okay, because some of us got a generic notification that there had been this breach, but it wasn't clear that you personally were part of that. So if you weren't told directly, you were not affected.
Correct. We wanted to notify others, and that's why you got a general notification
Right.
saying the protection we've secured is available to you. Your information was not breached, but we wanted to give you the
Right.
same protection as we were
Responsible,
giving.
yeah. Thank you. Ms. Spendor, what is the relationship between your office and Ms. Kaufman's? I mean, as you point out in your testimony, we're the only group that I know of required by law to go to the exchange. And that exchange is our local DC exchange and our staff, except committee staff who exempted themselves. So what is your relationship with this office, and what's your view about their special relationship given the fact that we are a high target? We're not, we're kind of in the high risk category. What's their responsibility? What's your responsibility to be, a careful guardian of pretty sensitive information about thousands of Capitol Hill employees?
Well, we certainly have had I haven't talked to Mila frequently, but we certainly worked together when we were first setting up the exchange, translations that we have to do in order to get them the data that they need. But primarily, we do not stay in close contact with each other because we've had the systems operating and functioning fairly well from our perspective until this has happened over the past years. But basically what they do is we have access to a different type of system than the report system that they're talking about, their main healthcare system, where our payroll and benefits employees will initially enter into their system through the web interface that they have, the names of the individuals who are eligible to enroll in the DC HealthLink data exchange, or DC HealthLink exchange. So we have our staff that interfaces that to provide them names of individuals. We also have our, once someone decides they want to be or are going to be on the exchange, our payroll and benefits system works with them to enter the information that they are going to be on the exchange. And I think most everything else then is carried forward by DC HealthLink as far as reaching out to the employee, entering all their detail, their personal information, and the health care plan that they are selecting. Other than that, during the month, we have a interface between the CAO's technology group and their group, whereby we send them any discrepancies that might have to be changed in their system, and any other small issues that might come up, things that have to be corrected. That is sent through what we have as a gateway server, which is just a very secure server where it's almost like you open up the traffic so that the data that we want to send goes in. We know when they want to accept the data, we open it up just for them to be able to pull that data from the gateway server. Then that connection is closed. So that's pretty much on a routine basis what we do.
Okay. Thank you. My time has expired.
All right, I would now like to recognize Chairman Loudermilk for his 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you both for being here today. I must admit that being 30 years in the IT industry, I worked a lot to secure networks and worked for my customers to hack into their networks, and I have become more confused sitting in here today as to what happened. I thought it would be clarifying. First of all, let me say, the majority of data leaks or cyber breaches are as the result of some form of human error. That is just known in the industry. When we work with companies, and I still will consult occasionally without fee to people who ask, Especially when it comes to setting up a security policy, your first thing you do is understand the majority of your data breaches are going to come from some form of human error. In 2017, Equifax had one of the largest data breaches in our country's history. It was because of a human error, just because someone failed to apply a patch to a system that was critical for their cybersecurity. So when I hear that it was a mistake, human error, tells me that there are other policies that were not in place to protect against these human errors. Two-person integrity, double-checking what people are doing. The other thing is an exposed IP address in itself does not create an exploitable server. Many servers have, through some form of firewall, gateway, IP masking, there is access to those servers that it's needed. There had to be some other vulnerability that was exploited on that server. So before I get to my other questions, Ms. Kaufman, I would like your commitment that you'll provide this committee the full mandate report as soon as it's received by DC Exchange, because either they've either summarized at a very elementary level what happened, or we just need to know exactly what's. Will you provide that report to this committee?
You have Mandiant's incident report. In addition to that, what I'm committing to doing is providing additional reports and information we gleaned from external independent cybersecurity experts that I've asked to look at our entire system, to your point of processes, policies, looking at the entire AWS environment that we're in, looking at our firewalls, our code, our configurations. I'm committing to providing you with updates on what we learn from external experts we've hired and all the steps that we're taking to make sure this never happens again. And we have tried, and I hope you recognize this, to be as transparent as possible and provide you with information as we have facts. I myself briefed 6 different congressional committees to date. We've met with...
Well, I don't mean to cut you off, but I am limited on time, and I do have to get to other things. We appreciate your transparency with us. We don't appreciate the transparency with the hackers, okay? And this is... just from what I've heard in here today, I mean, every system is subjected to a hacker. When I ran a business, it was always, the question was not if my customer is going to be hacked, but when. And you always had to stay a step ahead of the bad guy. It's vigilance. It's continual vigilance. That's the only way that you can secure against this. From just what I've seen so far, that this was made extremely easy for somebody to get in. But let me get to my questions at this point. I'm going to start with Ms. Spendor. Can you briefly describe for us the level of assessment a vendor must undergo prior to providing an essential service to the House that requires access to member and staff data? Because a lot of times it's not just people inside the organization, but it's their vendors. What level of assessment must they go through?
A fairly rigorous process we put our vendors through. I can highlight some of the steps that we go through. We require an authorization to operate, or ATO, that is managed primarily by our cybersecurity team with the help of the other groups that are in our technology organization. This is for contractor-owned systems hosted outside of the House infrastructure, enterprise cloud systems, and third-party service providers and solutions or applications hosted on House infrastructure. There are 2 critical requirements. The ATO process that is ensure that the vendor's implementation of security and privacy controls are there to protect the House information and is validated and monitored throughout the system life cycle. The ATO process requires vendor-supported information systems to undergo an independent assessment to test and validate the implementation of security controls to protect the confidentiality, integrity, availability, and privacy of house information. A condition of the ATO approval is that the vendor system be enrolled in a continuous monitoring program to continuously assess and validate successful implementation and effectiveness of required security controls.
No, it sounds like is not only do you give the access, but you're continuing to monitor their
We
access. Okay.
And if there were anything that would come up, similar to some of the things that were brought up about VMware, SolarWinds, things of that sort, and we knew a vendor might be using that product, we would immediately contact them and initiate some type of requested
Okay.
assessment.
Thank you very much. Ms. Kaufman, same question. Briefly describe for us your level of assessment a vendor must go through prior to providing service to the DC Health Exchange.
Thank you. So for our vendors, we require that for their employees that there is no civil or criminal activity related to, and I'll just read you a portion relevant to this: fraud, theft, embezzlement, breach of fiduciary responsibility, or other financial misconduct in connection with the delivery of healthcare item or service, or with respect to any act or omission in any program operated by or financed in whole or in part by any federal, state, or local government agency. So our vendors are required to do due diligence on employees that they hire. For our own employees, we follow DC government standards, which include criminal background checks for security-sensitive positions, which means fingerprinting, FBI fingerprinting, and criminal background.
So what I'm hearing is you do a form of background check on your vendors and your employees. What I didn't hear is the ongoing analysis of your vendors and their access to the systems and evaluating their systems as well.
I just want to clarify, we do the background checks working with another DC agency for our employees. We require our vendors to be responsible for doing the checks on their employees. Otherwise, they're in breach of their contract.
No, so okay, I understand. I've gone way over my time. Yield back.
We all have, but appreciate your comments, Mr. Loudermilk, about the IP address. Just because it's exposed doesn't mean that the reports are right there. And so there's something obviously more going on here, and we're not getting the answers today on that, quote, misconfigured, quote, server. I would now like to recognize Congresswoman Torres for her 5 minutes.
Ms. Spendor, of the 56,000 individuals exposed outside of the members of Congress and the staff, I think us working in this campus are very knowledgeable and have access to a lot of resources to protect our information. I'm very concerned about the people outside of this campus. Can you tell me how did you notify them? Let's start with that.
And I want to be clear, I understand, for those individuals whose data was exposed, but maybe they had been a House employee?
Had not been a House employee.
Had not been a House
Just your
employee.
average citizen that buys their...
Well, I understand. That really was not something, we did not notify those individuals. That was up to DC HealthLink to notify those individuals that were not House employees.
Okay, can you answer that question, Ms. Kaufman?
Yes. So we did it through a variety of mechanisms. One, within 3 days of the breach, we secured identity theft and credit monitoring protection through Experian for 3 years.
No,
And
I understand that. But how did you notify the people outside, working outside of this building?
Yeah, we notified everyone.
How? Email, phone, multiple languages, only in English? Explain that to me.
We put a notice in their DC HealthLink account and triggered an email alerting them to review their notice, that it's urgent. The notice had, in addition to English, had a bunch of other taglines associated with it. It was very clear saying their information was breached. We identified specifically which of their information was breached. And I'll just tell you, the take-up rate for Experian protection is now 19.1%. And I think that also—
That is still a very low number. 19.1% of the people that you notified have utilized, taken advantage of the resources that you are providing. Is that correct?
So the average Experian reports is 5 to 10%. Another major credit bureau reports about 4% take-up rate.
But
So I agree with you.
Yeah.
It should be 100%.
I'm just trying to
but
get
it is
to
higher.
how do we work together to ensure that we protect the people outside of this building? Those are the people that need our help the most. Those are most vulnerable, the day-to-day American who goes to work every day, who doesn't understand about the security issues, that we face here in this building every day. What more can you do on that note to help those people?
So in addition to issuing 3 public updates, we briefed the the 3 largest DC chambers, asking them for help to notify their members. Many of their members are our customers, so DC Chamber of Commerce, the Greater Washington Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, and the Restaurant Association Metropolitan Washington. In addition to that briefing, we asked our brokers, we emailed our brokers, and we did 2 briefings for our brokers. 92% of our employers have a broker, and we asked our brokers to notify their clients about this breach and asked for their help.
Did they do that, to your knowledge?
I think some did.
Okay, can you follow up on that and let us know if that was done, and if not, I hope that you would, go back to them and ensure that that gets done. My other question is the server configuration concern. Who provided the guidance for the person who configured that server? Was that the people providing guidance on how that server needed to be configured? Did they have a background in cybersecurity? Do we know that?
So everyone who works on our system has IT skill set, and then we have folks who look at the security aspect of the code and what they're doing.
And how often do they get training on security breaches and how to protect the system?
The cybersecurity training for our staff and that our vendor has is just ongoing. There are formal things that they also must do, but it's ongoing. And if I can just add, I hired an external cybersecurity expert to investigate what happened with this human mistake. And we're going to have a lot of information on when the server was misconfigured, why it was misconfigured, why it wasn't caught, and all of the steps that led to this event. And once we identify everyone who had any part of it, we're going to have lots of information to act on and lessons to make sure it never, ever happens again.
Thank you, and I yield back.
And hopefully that means they get fired. I'm going to recognize Congressman Timmins for his 5 minutes, and then the witness has asked for a break, and we'll do that after Mr. Timmins' questions for 5 minutes. We'll do a quick 5-minute break. Okay? All right, Mr. Timmins.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. We have a problem in this country, both with cybersecurity and privacy. It is not just the government, it's the private sector. We have not taken the steps necessary to protect the data that we either voluntarily give to private companies or involuntarily give to the government. When a private company has a data breach, people file lawsuits. They have to do a settlement, there's fines. Largest settlement is $1.2 billion, $877 million. Equifax, $575 million. So that's how we hold them accountable. We hold them accountable by fining them, and the purpose of that is to get other businesses to take better care of their data and to protect their customers more. We just found out a couple hours ago that the CFPB, which we don't voluntarily give our data to them, they take it. They acknowledge that they had a data breach, 250,000 individuals' files were sent in an email, and so the people that fine businesses, I mean, the Equifax settlement was with the FTC and the CFPB, so what are we going to do to them? And I guess that's one thing I want to talk about, but the other thing is this. Your business is a public-private partnership. What is your ownership structure? Ms. Kaufman.
Yes, we were set up by DC government as a private-public partnership. What that means is we have a private executive board that oversees our policies and sets direction.
Is there I mean, if it's a public-private partnership, there's a private in there. So what is is it a for-profit? Is it not for-profit? Who owns it?
We're an instrumentality of DC government, so it's
why is it then not just
quasi-government? I'm
so,
sorry?
So it's quasi-governmental. Do you have statutory immunity? Could somebody sue you for this? Can you get a fine for this? What's going to happen? I mean, I'm sure you've talked to your lawyers. What is going to happen other than you have to come before oversight and maybe have some changes to your contracts? What's going to happen? What do you think is going to happen?
There have been lawsuits that have been filed.
Okay. By individuals or by the FTC, or who is coming after, who is pursuing this?
Affected individuals.
Okay. I imagine that'll be ongoing for a while. How do you, if you do get a fine and or settle, how do you pay for that? Do you have insurance?
We're required by federal law to be self-sustaining and financially solvent. We have a capital reserve that we will be using if we have to.
So if you have to pay tens of millions of dollars to settle a lawsuit, you're going to then turn it around and charge your customers more? How are you going to do that? Is that the plan? Is that what would happen?
You also asked whether there is cybersecurity insurance policy in place. There is one.
What are the limits?
I don't know.
Okay. Well, I mean, I don't think many people have an option other than to use your services. I'm pretty sure that I have to. I mean, members of Congress are on that exchange, and we are statutorily required. That was a great idea that Congress did during Obamacare. But, you know, we got to have accountability. And we have accountability with Equifax and Amazon. When they have these breaches, they pay huge sums of money. And I guess I just hope that your cybersecurity insurance is sufficient to cover whatever damages are deemed to have. I guess, Ms. Spendor, do you think that we should reevaluate whether members of Congress and your employees should be forced to use the health exchange?
Well, I really think that is up to you in Congress to make an evaluation of that. We were compelled to do so.
By the law, sure.
By the law and through OPM, who said
Okay.
we would use the DC Health Exchange to facilitate the members and any of their staff from joining. But I think that is definitely something that is up to the
Okay.
members.
I appreciate that answer. Thank you. And, Ms. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you.
Thank you, and we're going to just let you take a 5-minute break, and we'll be here when you're done. All right?
residents, families, small businesses, and nonprofits that I represent. Ms. Kaufman, you mentioned that the DC Health Benefit Exchange Authority is offering 3 years of free credit monitoring to all customers whose data was at risk. How do these resources or resource offerings compare to what other breached organizations offer victims?
Yeah, we believe that the 3 years of identity theft monitoring and credit monitoring for all 3 major credit bureaus for 3 years exceeds what typically happens. Typically, you may get 1 or 2 years, or you may just get monitoring for 1 major credit bureau. We wanted to go as broad as possible, and beyond people whose information was not stolen, we've made this protection available to everyone, past and current customers.
Well, Ms. Kaufman, once you discovered the breach, how quickly were these resources offered?
We discovered the breach on March 6th. We were able to secure Experian credit monitoring and identity theft monitoring by March 9th. And that's when we notified the customers whose information was stolen. And then on March 10th, so this is just a matter of days after discovering the breach, on March 10th, we started to notify other customers whose information was stored in the same manner as the 2 stolen reports, but we had no evidence that it was actually stolen.
I understand that the acceptance rate for credit monitoring and other services you offered were higher than the industry average. Ms. Kaufman, have you considered taking any additional actions to support victims of the data breach?
Yes, we continue to work with all of our DC HealthLink assisters and the 3 largest chambers, and certainly our brokers. We've asked them for help to notify their clients. I also just want to say how appreciative I am of the House CAO and her deputy in the outreach that they did through their mechanisms to members of Congress and affected staff.
Well, Ms. Kaufman, did DC HealthLink inform affected customers of the breach and of the credit monitoring resources via a message loaded into the DC HealthLink account in boxes? Isn't that correct?
We loaded the breach notice into DC HealthLink account, and that also triggered an email to let the person know to check their account.
This message generated a generic email to email addresses on file, notifying them to check their DC HealthLink account box. Is that correct?
Yes.
Did the email contain any mention that the breach had occurred or give any indication that their personal data had been compromised?
The email itself did not have that kind of information. It was marked urgent to check their DC HealthLink account for an important notice.
Impacted individuals would therefore need to take the time to log into their DC HealthLink accounts or even know about the breach and the free credit offering. Isn't that correct?
Yes, they can also call our call center and get that information as well. We shared information with the 3 largest chambers and our brokers, so our brokers can share that information with their customers. And so we have different ways that we've shared both the Experian codes and the information on how to sign up for the 3-year protection.
We understand, Ms. Kaufman, that the open rate for emails was between 22% and 32%. So theoretically, many individuals impacted by the breach are not aware that their data was stolen?
The open rates for the notices, I think, is what you quoted. So that's how many people actually looked at the notice. And so we're not relying solely on the email or the information in the account, and that's why we did 3 public updates and we created a special web page on dchealthlink.com. Initially, we had a pop-up, so that's the first thing you see when you go to dchealthlink.com, that we've suffered a data breach. But that is precisely why we're working with stakeholders like the business community and our brokers and our DC HealthLink certified assisters to help get the word out and encourage people to avail themselves of the 3-year identity theft and credit monitoring protection for all 3 major credit bureaus.
Well, Ms. Kaufman, has the authority explored additional...
Ms. Norton, we're about 2.5 minutes over.
I know, but everybody was
Everybody got
over.
about 2.5 minutes over.
Okay.
Well, you did good. You and Timmins did not. So about 30 more seconds, please.
Well, I must note that everybody took more time, and since I'm more deeply involved than everyone else.
No, yes, ma'am, and I'm giving you more time. You're at almost
All right.
3 minutes over,
Okay.
which will be the most that anybody had today.
All
So
right,
thank
I'm
you.
almost through. Ms. Kaufman, has the authority explored additional methods of notifying DC residents besides email, such as text, phone call, or paper mail?
We're looking at all options available to help notify people.
Finally, Ms. Kaufman, what metrics and evaluative tools are you using to assess the effectiveness of your outreach strategies?
Well, we looked at the industry, what the Experian and other major credit bureaus report for take-up rates in case of breaches. And Experian reports 5 to 10% take-up rate. Ours currently is 19.1%, so above their reported average. Another major credit, Equifax, reports 4% take-up rate. So right now we're at 19.1%. But as I mentioned earlier, obviously we want everyone whose information was stolen to avail themselves of this protection.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Norton. I would now like to recognize Congressman Stile for 5 minutes, maybe.
I'll try to keep it at 5. This is an important topic. Chair Mace, Chair Loudermilk, thanks for doing this. The ranking members as well. Ms. Spendor, Ms. Kaufman for being here in going through this. Last month, members of the congressional community, including over 800 House members, staff, and family members, at a minimum, had their private information unnecessarily exposed after the breach of the DC HealthLink. To me, the goal of our hearing today is how did this happen? What steps are being taken to protect the information of those exposed and ensuring it never happens again. We received the 7-page forensic report, Ms. Kaufman. Did I hear you that that's the final report, or is that the preliminary report?
The report we shared with the committee staff is Mandian's incident report.
And that's the full. That's not the preliminary report. That's the report.
I believe that's the report on the incident.
Let me then come in. I thought it was the preliminary report when I read it. It's 7 pages. It is wildly underwhelming if that's the final report. I think that's something we should look into more broadly. Go ahead, Ms. Kaufman.
So in addition to the getting Mandian in right away to help us with the incident response, and that's the report you have, I have asked external cybersecurity experts to look at our entire system, which includes looking at our code, looking at the AWS environment.
So there's another. So see if I get this correct. So there's another vendor separate of Mandiant that's producing this review.
We have several different expert vendors who are looking at our entire system, and what I've committed to doing earlier is providing you with information as we have information from external experts who are looking at our entire system to make sure, one, there's no malicious actor in our system.
Understood. I got a lot of questions, and I don't know if I have a short amount of time, but a short amount of time to go through with you. So I appreciate that. I'll just say that the Mandiant report was wildly underwhelming. I'll leave it there for now. You noted, I think, Ms. Kaufman, you said to Ms. Mace that this vulnerability may have existed for 5 years. Is that accurate?
The server in question was misconfigured mid-2018 when it was being configured to work with Slack.
So you'll say misconfigured, I'll say vulnerable, but the problem existed since 2018.
We are figuring out when exactly the issues occurred.
Okay.
But the configuration
Okay.
was done in mid-2018. And so another external expert on cybersecurity is doing a full investigation for me to
Understood.
identify all those facts.
Understood and appreciate that. Ms. Spendor, appreciate you being here. How often is the House of Representatives the target of a cyber attack?
Every single moment of every day,
Continuously.
continuously.
Every moment, every day, we are the target of attacks. The CIO's Office of Cybersecurity works around the clock to ensure, to protect members and staff that our data is protected. Is that accurate? Because we're getting attacked around the clock.
Yes, sir. It's all the cyber team plus me.
And appreciate, and let me say, I know you got a lot of folks on your team that do a great job on behalf of both the staff and the members here, and thank you to you and your staff for the work you guys do literally around the clock, in particular as it relates to IT. Any vendor wishing to do business with the United States House of Representatives has got to go through a vigorous and rigorous assessment by the CAO in order to be approved and granted access to our systems. Is that correct?
Correct.
And would a vulnerability exist for years before, in the House, would such a vulnerability be able to exist for years before it's detected?
I would think it would be very, very hard to have a vulnerability out there that we would not detect for that length of time.
Yep, okay, so, I mean, it's obviously, in theory, it's possible, but we got a really rigorous system here in the House. We don't think that happens because we have systems in place that would catch it.
Yes.
And that's why we have a high standard. And the breach that occurred did not occur in any system under your control in the United States House of Representatives, right?
That's correct.
And so the PII that's out there was because there was a vendor that wasn't vetted by the United States House of Representatives system, right?
Correct.
In members and staff are required to participate in this exchange due to a law that was written by Congress, a federal law. Is that right?
Correct.
And so the breach that occurred on a vendor that doesn't meet the House's standards. Is that accurate? This vendor, the standard that the vendor had and the error the vendor had would not meet the standard that you have for vendors to the United States House of Representatives, right?
With this current breach.
Okay. And so is Ms. Mace asked, Ms. Spendor, if I can, is the Chief Information Officer of the House and the current CAO, knowing what you do about cybersecurity practices of the DC Health Exchange Authority and the vulnerability that led to this breach, would you recommend DC Health Exchange Authority as a secure vendor with which the House could confidently do business?
I'm not sure that I would.
Well, they're below your standards, so you wouldn't, I can't fathom you'd recommend we would do business with them.
If we were doing an evaluation today.
If you did an evaluation today of the standard that existed before the breach, would they pass or fail? They'd fail,
Right,
right?
right.
But members are still doing business with the DC Health Exchange today. I'll tell you, as chairman of the Committee on House Administration, I look forward to working towards solutions to ensure that we serve this institution and we're not in this position ever again. I appreciate our witnesses being here. Madam Chair, I yield back.
Thank you. I would now like to give 5 minutes to Congressman Griffith.
I thank the gentlelady, and I apologize that I've not been able to participate and be a part of this hearing up to this point in time. I was chairing another subcommittee hearing where we were dealing with issues related to data brokers. But this is an important hearing, and I look forward to getting all the information, not just the part I've been able to sit in on for the last, say, 15 minutes. With that, I would yield my time to my colleague from the great state of Georgia, Mr. Loudermilk.
I appreciate that from my friend and colleague from Virginia, and I'm going to try to keep this within our time frame so we can actually set a record in here that somebody stayed within the 5 minutes. And I just want to complete some of the questioning that I was doing earlier. Ms. Spendor, as I know, but as you can explain, the House employs a number of information systems officers, is that correct?
Correct.
Can you please elaborate on the role of these individuals as it relates to, as you mentioned, continually monitoring House-approved vendors?
Yes, sir. I'd be glad to. The individuals that we have that work within our cybersecurity group that are known as security systems officers, there are 5 of them, and they are essentially responsible for when a request comes in from a vendor, and we are beginning the ATO process to determine their viability as a vendor. They make sure that all the steps are followed, that we have done the evaluation as it was intended to be done. And these individuals work around the clock. So far, we have authenticated 36 different systems and have 9 in progress, but these ATOs are reevaluated on a continuous basis. So these individuals stay very busy.
So, in short, you may say that they're always checking the work.
Yes.
Okay.
And by the way, we are talking about our PeopleSoft system and some of our other large systems that we have as well.
Okay.
As part of that.
Thank you for that. Ms. Kaufman, does the DC Health Exchange have information system security officers on staff?
We do, and may I address something else? There's been a lot of assertions, many assertions made about how secure our system is. Let me just say, we use Cloudflare, FortiGate, Splunk, Tenable, and other security technologies that U.S. intelligence agencies use, Fortune 100 companies use, U.S. Secret Service, Homeland Security, and the list goes on. We have 24/7 monitoring. We've been under attack since we opened for business October 1, 2013.
And I understand that, and that is an impressive list, but the fact remains there was a breach, that it goes to the security of, and the operations, having those systems, having those devices, just as Equifax learned, unless they are continually monitored, unless the oversight is given, unless the policies and procedures that you have address potential human error, and that they are enforced, you're going to have these type of breaches. I want to continue on my questioning, though. You said, yes, that you do have information system security officers on staff. How many?
Correct. In addition to an outside firm we use to help us with 24/7 monitoring of our system, we have full-time people. We have 4 people on staff who work in addition to outside firm we use.
Those 4 people, they're considered information systems security officers, not just IT folks, not just programmers, not just network analysts. They're specifically for security.
They only work on cybersecurity.
Okay. And so you have 4, and you said a vendor.
And we use supplemental staff from a cybersecurity company to supplement the 4, and then internally, when we need to pull in more people, we do.
So do these 4 that you've alluded to, do they continually monitor and test your vendors for cybersecurity vulnerabilities?
Yes, they test everything. They look at the code, they look at the environment, they engage in pen testing, they look at, the 24/7 logs we get.
Do they look at server configurations?
They look at everything.
But something got missed.
Something got missed, and that is why I wanted an external investigator to help me figure out how we missed this, why it was missed, so it never gets repeated again.
Well, Since Mr. Griffith took about 45 seconds to yield to me, I technically made it within my time. I yield back to Mr. Griffith.
Thank you.
And I yield back to the chair.
Thank you. In closing today, as we wrap this up, I want to thank our panelists once again for their testimony today and those members of Congress who showed up and asked tough questions. I appreciate the witnesses' participation and willingness to discuss the data breach at the DC Health Exchange. Questions remain. We still don't know what a misconfigured server by DC HealthLink standards is. We know when it was misconfigured. We don't know who misconfigured it or how it was misconfigured, and the Mandian report was pretty lame and uninformed. So, Ms. Kaufman, I hope you and your team will continue to cooperate with Congress and with this committee. Please keep us posted about any future reports related to the data breach and actions taken by the exchange in response to the breach. Will you commit to that? With that and without objection, all members have 5 legislative days within which to submit materials and submit additional written questions for the witnesses, which will be forwarded to the witnesses for their response. If there's no further business without objection, we are adjourned.